What's up, guys? I would like to thank Mr. Aaron Bort for your donation, sir. Thank you very much. That was very kind of you. I really appreciate it. And thanks for sticking around for all of these years while I go through my slow and methodical process of trying to understand things. So I spent a couple days looking through old photographs, doing the same thing everybody else is doing. And if I were to make one statement about the ancient world, it would be that they took pride in life. I mean, just look at this bas relief. It tells a story that's hard to put into words, but everybody knows what that means. And it seems to me that they did art for the sake of art, not art to make money. And they were very good at it. I mean, just look at this glass fragment that was probably part of a glass or a bowl or something. And, that's better glass work than we get today. And items that today we take for granted and think of as simple, like a mirror, to them, it was a work of art. And, I'll guarantee you this mirror was made for someone in particular and wasn't just made to sell and make some money. When I look at the ancient world, I see a lot of dedication, a lot of skill, and a lot of hard work. And if you want to understand what life was like back then, just look at what they carved. I mean, they carve oxen and carts and horses and chariots and sailing ships. And that's a technology that is highly underrated by any researchers out there because, it's not that hard to build a house that will stand up, but to build a ship that will not sink in really stormy weather is quite the accomplishment. But the ancients were very skilled and they built all these amazing structures all around the world for everyone to still see to this day. Look at Athens here back in the early 1900s. The earliest photographs I found of this were, the 1870s, I believe. And I'm bringing all of this up to kind of set the stage of what the ancient world was like prior to the 14th century catastrophes, and then the world after that, which I'll call that the old world, since that's kind of what everybody on the internet is referring to, is that 300 or 400 year period right before our modern age. So, what I want to talk about here was the people that lived after the 14th century catastrophes, because it was no different than if it happened today. Just think if 80% of the world died because, you had the great famine and the, couple years of no harvest, no crops, a lot of people starved. And then you had all of the earthquakes and the Black Death, and entire cities were left barren. So just think about living right outside of Athens 100 years after a catastrophe, to where instead of people having an abundance of food and leisure time to focus on art and architecture and all of these things, everybody's living a hard scrabble life just trying to produce enough food to live. And the truth is, the people that survived the catastrophe probably didn't want to tell their grandkids about the horrors that they had witnessed in their life. And so a couple generations down the line, you would have just had all of these ruins and nobody's quite sure how all this stuff was built. Now, somewhere like Athens or Rome, you did have enough artisans that survived and, taught their skills to the next generations. And they went on to create all of the Baroque structures and the Italian Renaissance that produced the greatest artists ever known in our modern time. But let's go 100 miles outside of the cities to the country style of life, to where most people really didn't go more than 20, 30 miles away from their home in their entire lives. They grew up with the cows and the chickens and the farmhouse and the barn, and then this bridge. This big stone bridge that when life was good, people would travel back and forth from city to city. But then after the catastrophes hit, the travelers probably stopped coming through this area very often, but you still got this big, huge bridge there. And it would leave one to wonder, how did this freaking bridge get here? Well, if you had absolutely no reference point of construction techniques for how it got there, The logical conclusion must be that the devil built it. And this is so strongly associated with that even if you Google Lake Gallenbeck Bridge, it comes up as the Devil's Bridge because that's what the locals know it as. And this is not a one-off thing. In fact, there are 17 bridges throughout Europe and England that are all known as the Devil's Bridge. And even today, with the internet at our disposal, I see a lot of people that don't know how these bridges are made. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not talking down to anyone in any way whatsoever. You don't know what you don't know. But refusing to even look into it and just assuming that it was this advanced technological society like we have today that built all of these things is no different than the medieval people saying that this was built by the devil. People are just trading out Tartaria for the devil. Only today we have bulldozers and cranes and all of this stuff, and everyone knows that as a reference point. So they assume that that's the only way it could have been built. And the ironic thing is since they do have those reference points, they assume again that they are smarter than people from the past. And honestly, what I've seen on the internet in the last couple of years is that people are just as superstitious today as they were back then. And I see how religions get started because now people have a new truth and you can't tell them anything otherwise. And they actually get really angry if you even suggest another option. But like I said in my video on cathedrals, an arch is an arch is an arch. They're all built the same way. It doesn't matter if it's 50 feet tall and spanning over a river or if it's 100 feet tall holding up a ribbed vault. So there are 17 different versions here that I've got of this Devil's Bridge legend, and they're all basically one or the other. It's either like a shepherd has one of their animals on the other side of the river or lake, or it's a construction worker that isn't going to be able to finish the bridge on time. And so the devil came to make an offer in exchange for a soul. So I'll just read you this one. Old lady Megan saw her one and only milk cow over on the other side of the river. And she said to herself, "Oh dear, what shall I do?" "What's the matter, Megan?" said a voice behind her. She turned around and saw a man cowled like a monk with a rosary at his belt. She had not heard anyone coming, but the noise of the waters boiling over and through the rocks may have drowned out the sound of footsteps. "I'm ruined," said Megan. "There's my one and only cow, the sole support of my old age, on the other side of the river." "Oh, don't worry about that," said the monk. "I'll get her back for you." "Well, how can you?" asked Megan. "I'll tell you," answered the stranger. "It's one of my amusements to build bridges, and if you like, I'll throw a bridge across the chasm for you." "Well, indeed, nothing would please me better," said the old woman, "but how am I to pay you?" "I'm very easily satisfied," said the monk. "Just let me have the first thing that crosses the bridge after I've finished it." Megan agreed to this, and the monk told her to go back to her cottage and wait there until he called for her. Now, Megan wasn't half the fool that she looked, and she had noticed while talking to the stranger that there was something rather peculiar about his foot, and she had a suspicion that his knees were behind instead of in front of him. So by the time the stranger called, she had put upon a plan. She had thrown some crust to her little dog to make him follow her and put a loaf of bread under her shawl and walked to the river. "There's your bridge," said the monk. Yes," said Megan, looking doubtfully at it. "Yes, it's a bridge, but is it strong?" "Strong?" said the builder indignantly. "Of course it's strong." "Will it hold the weight of this loaf?" asked Megan. "Hold the weight of this loaf?" laughed the monk scornfully. "Throw it on and see." So Megan rolled the loaf onto the bridge, and the little dog scampered out and ate it. "Yes, it will do," said Megan. "And, kind sir, my little dog is the first living thing to cross the bridge. You're welcome to him, and I thank you very much for all the trouble you've taken." "The stupid dog's no good to me," said the stranger, and vanished into thin air. From the smell of brimstone which he had left behind, Megan knew that, as she had suspected, it was the devil whom she had outwitted. Now, like I said, basically all of the stories have the same theme to them, little changes here and there, and in the end, they all end up outwitting the devil. And like I've been saying for a while, if you understand that a huge portion of the population was wiped out and the world was basically set back 400 or 500 years, then our history of the last few hundred years actually makes a lot of sense. And if you or I had grown up on a little farm out in the middle of nowhere and there was this bridge sitting there and you had no frame of reference whatsoever of how it actually got there, then we'd probably be saying that it was built by the devil too. But no, we've got the internet and we're a lot smarter now, so it was obviously built by the Tatarians. Devil, devil. Another interesting legend about old bridges and even London Bridge is they say that there are bodies inside of the bridge. And this dates back to medieval times. And they say it's a ritual to ensure longevity. And this legend even continues into modern times because if you're like me, I've always heard that there were dead bodies inside of the Hoover Dam project. But it turns out that there are not any bodies. What I had heard is they fell off into the wet concrete and there's nothing they could do, so there's dead bodies in the Hoover Dam. But evidently it's not true, and this is just a legend that has perpetuated ever since medieval times. So this is really fascinating to me right now, and I want to do a couple more videos about it because if you think about living, from the 1400s to the 1800s and traveling across the countryside, you'd have found all kinds of weird stuff with no explanation. I mean, just imagine today with our modern understanding of things, if you went traveling from one town to another and found this, or if you're sailing in and you found this, looks like an old light tower out in the middle of the ocean. And all of this stuff was still there just 100 years ago. So there's been an obvious effort to destroy all of these old structures just since the time of colonization. And what we've got is the official narrative saying that the Romans built everything, the internet version saying the Tatarians built everything. And hey, maybe it was the devil. I guess the devil knows. Static out.